The rise and fall of the Roman Empire. During the rise of the empire, there were two groups. There were the patricians and the plebeians. The patricians were the wealthy upperclassmen who inherited their social status and claimed their ancestry gave them the authority to make laws, while the plebeians were the common farmers, artisans, and merchants who made a big percent of the population. At that time, the plebeians were allowed to form their own assembly and elect representatives called tribunes. They protected them from the unfair acts of the patrician officials. A couple hundred years later came the Roman leader Augustus, who was known as Rome's most able ruler. He glorified Rome and stabilized it. He also created a system that lasted for centuries. He set up a civil service which paid the citizens to take care of the governmental affairs. The empire grew so vast that it extended from Spain to Mesopotamia and from North Africa to Britain.
Romans created something called a legion, which consisted of 5,000 heavily armed foot soldiers known as infantrymen, a group of soldiers on horseback known as cavalry. Their first triumph was the conquering of Italy. First, they defeated the Etruscans to the north and Greek city-states southward. The First Punic Wars started when Carthage and Rome went to war in 264 BC. This eventually led to the series of events known as the Punic Wars. In all, there was three. Rome won two, and Hannibal led Carthage to the victory during the Second Punic War. What is inflation? Inflation is when there's a decline in money and when the prices of goods and services goes up. In Rome, this happened during at the end of Pax Romana. This happened because there were tribes attacking from the outside, so the government, in a desperate act, raised taxes, which led to inflation. This inflation eventually led to the reform of Rome when Diocletian came in and split the empire, making it easier to manage. Diocletian, the man who split the Roman Empire into two sides, the east and the west. The east side had much more luxurious things and was in much more control because Diocletian directly led them while he had someone else look after the west side. Eventually, the west side fell because of the Huns pushing the Germanic tribes into the west, but also because there was no direct influence from Diocletian himself, so the economy wasn't doing well either.
When it comes to trade, Rome had vast connections. Ships from the east traveled the Mediterranean. They were known to trade with China and India, which brought their wares to many provinces and beyond. During the fall of the Roman Empire, population decline was a big factor, as many people decided to go to Constantinople. Not only that, but they were being invaded by the Visigoths, Vandal, Germanic tribes, and the Huns. Then the economy dropped, and then came the inflation, which raised the prices of all the goods at the time.
A major architect structure during the time of Rome was an aqueduct. It helped expand and it was used to carry water into major cities. The water channel was spanned, then the aqueducts was lifted up high up on arches. Rome had a law system that they wanted every Roman Empire to be controlled, and it was called the 12 Tables. And mainly, it's about death, trials continued, public law, guardianship, and rights of fathers over the family. And they used all those laws to protect one another. And if anyone was lying, they had one of the tables to protect them. And they were very important to the system because it kept all the empire controlled and they knew how to rule it.
Some of the things that the Romans set in place thousands of years ago are things such as they developed a form of representing government and they implemented the innocent until proven guilty. Then came the principle of a republican government, which allows citizens to elect their leadership. They also had an executive, legislative, and judicial branch of the government.